Viewers, welcome. This is your host, Bhavik Kothari. Welcome to yet another episode of the VLLOW Podcast. Today, I'm extremely excited to have Coach Shaun Siegert on our program. He is the Director of High Performance at the Root Academy. But before we get into our podcast, let me tell you a little bit about VLLOW Sports. We are a global direct-to-consumer cricket equipment company. We focus on premium and customized cricket equipment. Please check us out at www.villowsports.com. Again, www.vllowsports.com. We have built a proprietary algorithm that matches the player exactly with the kind of bat that suits his batting style. That's what we are known for. Also, we believe that the best way to promote our brand is through rich content, and believe that podcast is one of the best forms of rich content that is out there. So let's get right into it. Welcome, Shaun. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
our podcast.
Pleased to be here.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You've got decades of
Yeah.
coaching experience. Of course, you started off as a player,
Yes.
but I'd love to know your story.
Yes. I've been coaching 30 years, and it's a funny story actually why I got into coaching. I had an issue with my knee as a player when I was age 30, and I started having issues with cartilage, and I basically got told I had to give cricket away, otherwise I was going to need a knee replacement. So I was really enjoying my cricket, and I didn't really want to do that. So I was thinking about how I could stay involved, and so I was at a club called Kensington, which is where Sir Donald Bradman played when he was in South Australia back in the late 30s and 40s. And I said to the coach, I said, is there a way I can stay involved? So I helped him as the assistant coach, and I found that I really enjoyed it. And I sort of went on and then became a senior coach at another grade club in Adelaide, Premier Grade Club. And then I got a job at South Australian Cricket. I was coach of the South Australian under-17 side, and then the under-19 side. And I worked at South Australian Cricket, and I was lucky enough to work under a person that probably everyone knows, Rod Marsh, who was the director of cricket at the time. And then it sort of came about where there was a program called the Darren Lehman Cricket Academy, which started in 2005, and we started this high performance program. And the first cricketer that I had come out into that program was Monty Panesar. And the story about Monty was that he came out and trained with us for 3 months. He went back to England at Christmas time. He trained up at Loughborough in preparation for a tour to India. And he got selected to go to India on his first tour. So within the space of about 3 weeks, he went from training in Adelaide to pick for England to tour India. So I was sort of thinking geez, this is a bit unusual. You coach a guy and he's selected to play for his country in the space of a couple of weeks. So he toured in India. He played in the first test, and he went out to bat with Paul Collingwood. And Paul Collingwood, he was on about 70 when he went out to bat, and he got him to his 100. So Collingwood made his first test 100. And then when he went out to bowl in his first opportunity to bowl at test cricket, his first test wicket was Sachin Tendulkar.
Oh, wow.
So I'm sort of sitting at home thinking this is kind of weird. This guy is gone from a nobody that was walking around Adelaide at the time that no one knew who he was, and all of a sudden he started becoming this cult figure that everyone knew around the world in the space of about a month. So I started to really enjoy that, and we started getting more and more cricketers coming out to the Darren Lehman Academy, and that program that I ran had 35 international players go through it over the course of about 10 or 11 years. But then I transitioned to the Root Academy because one of the cricketers that came out was Joe Root, and Joe was 19 years old when he was out in that program. And he was just at the time a second 11 player at Yorkshire. So anyway, he went back to England after he'd spent the summer in Australia. He went back to England. He got selected for Yorkshire in the first game of the season, county game of the season. And he did really well. And by the end of that summer, so again, in the space of about I don't know, 4 or 5 months, he got picked for England A. So he went from a county second 11 player to a England A player. So anyway, the reason I went across there was because Joe, he wanted to give people the opportunity that he had, because it made a massive impact on his cricket career.
Life, right?
So yeah, so I went across there and running the same program. So I've been running that program for 18 years. So
wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I was sort of into coaching, and yeah, I suppose in terms of a development coach, whereas, I suppose there's two types of coaches. There's team coaches and there's player development coaches. And I probably enjoy the player development side of things more than the team coaching, because it's about, developing individuals' cricket games and trying to improve them. But I also think the thing that I enjoy, I think you can really sort of tap into a lot of the things that are going on inside them to talk about and try and develop, because as a team coach, sometimes in a professional environment, you're threatened a little bit by saying certain things because it might compromise your selection or your contract and things like that. But if you're a development coach, there's not that threat, and I think you can be a lot more open in terms of addressing the things that you need to do to get better.
Players are likely to open up a lot more.
I think so, because there's not that external threat of, if I say something that might sort of impact, my position in the team or getting another contract.
Right.
So I think as a coach, I think sometimes it's those things that are sort of buried inside are the things you really need to address to actually move forward.
You've got a wealth of experience, and there's a lot I want to cover in this podcast. But I was thinking of what is a good place to start. I'll tell you, I read a book. The title is "How Athletes Are Made." We'll put a link in the video description. But that book talks about a small town called Wagga Wagga.
Yeah, in Australia, Wagga Wagga.
Wagga Wagga. Sorry, I got the pronunciation wrong. But Wagga Wagga, it's not a major city. No. It's kind of in between two cities, but it's got a very rich sporting culture.
Yeah.
It's punched way above its weight in terms of generating athletes in multiple sports, cricket included. So the book just uses that microcosm as an example of the sporting culture in Australia. And coming from the subcontinent, I've always been fascinated by how well Australia does in general, but especially with major tournaments and especially finals in major tournaments. So there must be a lot of things that are being done well.
Yeah.
And I want to delve deep into that.
It's interesting, just going back to that Wagga Wagga thing, because I went to a skill acquisition conference years ago, and there was a guy at the time that was talking about that, who was regarded as Australia's leading skill acquisition coach in Australia. And he actually talked about that as to why not so much the big cities produce this elite talent. It's more these sort of reasonably big regional towns, especially in Australia. And you'll find actually a lot of the Australian cricketers or elite sports people don't actually come from the city. They come from country areas. And the reason for that he explained is that what happens in the country is different to the city. So in the city, you tend to play your age group and you tend to progress through your age group. But what happens in the country is you play against men at a very young age. So you'll be playing junior cricket at your age level, but because they don't have the populations, you tend to play against men. You might only be filling in, but you're actually getting exposed to men's sport at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And the critical thing about developing cricketers, or not just cricketers, but any sports people, is your ability to move through the system as quickly as you can. And you only learn the cricket you know by playing it, or sports you're playing. So when you play against men at a young age, it is completely different sport to what you're playing at your age group. So, and I know I did it. I grew up in a little country town in South Australia, and I was playing against men when I was 12 years old. And you get the big fast bowler would come in and he'd be bowling your bouncers at 12 years old and not holding back. And the thing is, what you got to learn is you start learning to play what is that game that I need to learn that is above you. And you only know what you know. You don't know what that game is until you play it. So the quicker you can learn the levels above and learn to struggle and learn to find answers to problems on how I'm going to be successful where you struggle is a critical thing that, according to this skill acquisition, in actually the development of a person. The longer you get stuck at a level, the harder it is to actually progress. And you start to learn actually how to play only at a lower level. So it's actually interesting, the science actually behind why actually, and you'll find a lot of elite sports people play men's sport or adult sport at a young age. And therefore also they don't fear it, because you get the longer you, or the more delayed you are in actually stepping into an environment, quite often the more you actually fear that. But if you do it at a young age, it's almost like it's normal. It's like going through that process. And I think one of the things it does, it actually creates this, and we talk about a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. And it's understanding a growth mindset is understanding that struggle and mistakes and setbacks and things are part of getting better. Dominating and doing well creates another type of mindset, which is a fixed mindset. Mm. So that is, then you try and avoid those challenges, because it's all about my natural talent and it's all about how I look. And that's how you value yourself and what makes you feel good. And so then you tend to avoid putting yourself in challenging situations. So it's actually quite interesting that the sort of the science behind, or what they say is the science behind, and certainly in Australia, like that's one of the key things. So, you sort of talked about like Australia, like they tend to do well in international tournaments. I think Australia, because, and I know we sort of had a bit of a chat about it, is in Australia, like we don't, and we talked about the case with India where there's a lot of pressure on. In Australia, there's probably not as much pressure on. And I think one of the things that's important about winning big tournaments when you get into finals is you've almost got to be not afraid to lose. If you fear losing and the consequences of losing, like that becomes into your mind and you hold back. Yeah. So you've got to be brave in a final and back yourself and take, the game on, like they say, and not be afraid that you might not be good enough. It's the approach of, sort of having a go and doing the best you can do, and I suppose hoping that it's actually going to come up goods. But it's interesting. Like again, and I've listened to sports psychologists talk about different mindsets, and they talk about, there's a guy called Phil Jauncey who's very well known in Australian sport. And there's two different types of mindset. There's an assertive mindset and there's a passive mindset. And he talks about the assertive mindset is where your fine motor skills kick in. Mm-hmm. So all the precision in what you do as an athlete only happen from an assertive mindset where I take things on. If you go into that passive mindset where you fear failure or fear losing, and that starts to creep in, you'll find motor skills. So you make errors in judgment and the way that the brain works. And we talk about in sport, you find, the precision in what you're doing is not happening. So it's interesting that, being brave, you tend to take things on and be assertive, whereas if you're passive and you're fearing failure and the consequences of failure, you tend to hold back.
Almost leads to failure, or leads to a loss.
That's right. Because the things you don't want to happen are the things you've created in your head, and then the brain starts to almost create those things that you've created in your head. So, it's not so much about skill, and it's not so much about the skill, your skill into a final. It's who's brave, who's prepared to take the game on, and not to say you want to lose, but in some ways doesn't fear losing, the consequences of losing. It's knowing you've done your best and you've done everything you can. And I suppose, again, if I'm going to drill down even a bit further with that, it's all about the process to making things happen. And it's trusting that process and executing that process and believing that that's going to bring you success. Once you start to doubt that or move away from that, that's when things start to go wrong.
it seems like all across Australia, uh, within cricket, which we all know, but across all sports, it seems like the systems, the structures, the processes have
Yeah,
been a lot more institutionalized, and there is a holistic buy-in
yeah,
from all stakeholders, and the belief in it
yeah,
um, creates this almost like um, a structure that works really really well.
yeah. Look, and again, Australia's a small country, like we're,
Yeah.
26, 27 million people. And for us to punch above our weight, we have to be very good in our systems, because when we have talent, whatever that happens to be in whatever sport, when we have talent, we don't have an excess of people that, he's no good or she's no good and someone else steps in. So when that talent presents itself, we have to be good at actually developing that system, developing that player. So the other thing I think, and I know from a cricket perspective, which is probably a bit different to other parts of the world, is that our, our pathway is very clean in Australia. And what I mean by that is that, so our high performance pathway, so the pathway to Australian cricket is obviously first class cricket, and below that is premier grade cricket. So
Hmm.
every state has a premier grade competition. Now, within that competition, there's an A grade team, a B grade team, a C grade team, and a D. There's four grades. So you move up and down through that system, and as long as you're in that system, you're in that pathway.
Hmm.
But what happens also that is different, I think, to other countries is if you're playing A grade cricket on a weekend, not every weekend, but there are weekends where first class players and sometimes international players come back and play at club level. So if I'm a young developing cricketer, I'm actually mixing it with players that are actually playing the professional game. Now, in other countries, that doesn't tend to happen. Once you play
Mm,
professional cricket, you're then removed
from the
from
club level, right?
amateur sport. So if you're a young 17, 18-year-old cricket and you're playing with or against, um, an Australian player or a state player, again, you're learning how to actually play the game at that level. And if you fail, well, you're learning then what you need to do. If you're succeeding, that's building a lot of confidence, and you're moving sort of through the system. So the fact that players are able to move in and out of club cricket, I think, is very unique, and I think a key factor. And I think one of the things
If
we've all,
if I may
yeah,
mention one thing, why is it that is different in Australia, where the state level or even international level players come back and play club level cricket? Why
it's
is that
always
the
just
case?
been the way it is. Like, and we've never, and there's been pressure for, and it probably doesn't happen as much as it used to. Back when I played, I mean, again, the international players actually played probably 3 or 4 weekends of a season. First class players probably played 50% of the season.
Mm.
But now they play so much more cricket, it's harder for that to happen. To give you an example, there was a T20 game last season, just before Christmas, where my club, Kensington, was playing a club called West Torrens. Now, Kensington in that game had 7 first class players playing in that team. And West Torrens had 4 first class players, and that 2 of those players were Australian players, Fraser McGurk
Wow.
and Spencer Johnson. So for any young cricketer, not at that level, he is playing in around some very good players. Now that's very unique, and that's because at the end of the day, the game is the teacher. What you play is what you learn. If you play low level cricket or not very good cricket, that's what you're learning how to play. But if you're playing high level cricket or playing against players at a high level, you're learning what they're doing that is different and what you then need to do to be successful at that level. So again, at the end of the day, you only know what you know. But when you get exposed to those sorts of things, you learn different things, and it's the finer things about the game. It's how you think and how you prepare and how you manipulate games of cricket and things like that. It comes down to very fine sort of I don't know, fine sort of parts of the game that you have the difference between winning and losing. It can be, how you play a particular over, how you approach a certain bowler, how you run between wickets. as a bowler, the fields I set, how I'm going to actually bowl to a really good player. The only way you learn those things is by doing those things and being in that environment. So I think that's a critical part of why we develop cricketers really well. And even at a youth level, like if you're a state under 19, like those players are actually playing at that level of cricket, so they're getting that experience at a young level. So yeah, I think that's a critical factor. And we've always sort of said the strength of the Australian cricket team is the standard of club cricket. If club cricket is weak and poor, the knock-on effect goes through to the Australian side. But if that is strong, that means first-class cricket is strong because there's more better players. And if there's more better players at first-class level, it's harder to get into the Australian team, and they're performing better. And it used to be, I know, and it probably not so much now, but I know back in the sort of the 90s and early 2000s when Australian cricket was very, very strong, we probably had a second 11 that could probably beat most countries.
Right.
But the thing was, if you dominated our first-class system, you were an international cricketer. There was no try going up and see how you go. You ticked all the boxes and you were ready for international cricket because first-class cricket was so strong in Australia.
Imran Khan said this in an interview, and he talked about Australia, and he said, anybody who plays Shield cricket in Australia can play test cricket for the country.
Yeah.
The structure and that tournament is just so good.
Yeah, it's a tough competition. And again, we've only got 5 states that compete. It's not like, English county cricket has 18 and it's got 2 divisions and things like that. I'm not sure what India has in terms of how many teams play in that competition, the Ranji Trophy. But in Australia, so it's only 6 teams. There's less better cricketers. So it's harder to get into those teams. So if you get into that level of cricket, it's hard work and you've got to work hard to get there. And it's pretty brutal if you don't perform. Like there's going to be someone because, there's less players, you need to fill the spots. So there's always sort of people outside the 11 that are breathing down your neck, which keeps you working hard and keeps you improving and you can't get complacent. So I suppose tough systems build tough people, and that sort of, it's not about coaching so much. It's just the system. The environment is critical, I think, because, it's hard to teach people things if your environment doesn't expose those things you're talking about. It just becomes words,
right?
Sort of thing. So, yeah, I think that's what's sort of different probably to a lot of systems around the world with Australia, and plays a big part in, why our teams are consistently sort of there or thereabouts.
And it's as much the mindset and the mental aspects of the sport or the development as much as the physical aspects. It seems like, some countries tend to skew a lot more on the physical aspects and getting the muscle memory and the skills.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, the mindset and the mental aspects are as important, if not more.
Yeah, I agree. And it's probably not quite so much now as it used to be. Like years ago, when I played, there was really no coaches. You just had to work things out yourself. Now there's more coaches around and more support. But you're right. Like technique is only one part of the development and part of a cricketer's game. It is important. I'm not saying it's not. It is an important factor because if you haven't got a technique, you're going to struggle. But there's other parts of the game, the mental, the tactical, the physical, they're all parts of what make up a cricketer. And the higher you go, it becomes more and more about the mental game. So if you're not training those things, you're going to start to actually get found out because your technique, if your mindset and your mental skills are poor, your technique is going to start to break down.
Yeah.
It might look good in the nets, but once you get under pressure in a game, if you don't have the mental skills, and certainly when you get into international cricket, it is all about the mental skills.
Right.
because they've all got talent at that level. It comes down to a lot of it's down to decision making and execution and things like that in the moment. And it's the people that do that well consistently are the people that tend to do well. So it's like anything. You just don't sort of develop that and wake up one day and you've got these mental skills. You need to work on these things, no different to a cover drive or an outswinger. You need to develop those skills. And I think the earlier you start those things, the better, because you start to put in the building blocks that players then can actually start to learn and put pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together. If you don't have those building blocks at a young age, you don't know what to do.
Right.
And you get lost and you get frustrated and disappointed and you don't know how to move forward.
You almost question your potential as a player.
Yeah, that's
even
right.
though may not be entirely the youth players' fault that they're not given some of those building blocks to build upon.
That's right.
Switching gears here, if we can talk about your evolution as a coach. I know offline we talked about like how many a time like the best of players don't become the best of coaches. If you've been in this profession for what 30 plus years, you must have done more than a few things, right?
I suppose, but and I know we talked about it. Like I think the thing is, what you've got to understand about players is they're all different. There is no two players the same, and you can't just sort of have a one tack approach to actually how you can actually develop and improve a cricketer, because as people we're all different. We've got different experiences. We think differently. We've got different personalities, and how we take information in is all different. So as a coach, you have to be able to be adaptable and you have to understand your athlete to actually understand the best way to actually make what you're saying actually connect with your player. So the most important thing, and I know in Australia when we talk about, in our coaching programs, the most important part of a coach is your relationships with your players. Now, that's not to say that you're, your best mates and your buddies and things like that. But you've got to have trust because, when you're working with elite athletes, they have a lot on the line and they need to trust in what you're saying. If they don't trust in what you're saying, they're not going to listen to you. So, as I said, they need to know that what you're saying to them is coming from a place where they feel safe and you're looking out for the best interests of them. Now, that probably didn't happen years ago so much. I mean, the world was different. Certainly back when I played, but the player of today is very much about, having trust and having relationships where they can have conversations where they make themselves vulnerable and put a lot of faith in that the coach is coming from the right place. So as a coach, if you've only got one way and it's not necessarily, you might have been a very good cricketer, but just because what worked for you is not necessarily going to work for the player that you're trying to coach. So you've got to be flexible and understand your player to then actually transfer and try and help that player develop. So, again, I mean, some coaches will sort of talk about what they did, but that's not necessarily going to help you because you're different, how you think and feel and your experiences and your ability and all those sorts of things are all different. So, that's the secret is you got to try and unlock what works for an individual that is able to work best for them. So, I think it's sort of different in that way. And if you're not prepared to do that, I think a coach these days is probably going to struggle a bit with in their impact that they have with their players. Whereas if someone is willing to do that and wants to sort of, understand their athlete, I think is had more of a chance of actually having success and helping that player become better.
Can you give us an example of a player? And you mentioned you're more on the development side, so development coach, which I find it very fast. I'd never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Development versus team. Maybe an example of how you helped a player kind of, overcome the challenges that he or she was facing.
I will, and I won't name the name, but it's incredible. My best experiences as coaches is not Joe Root, and Joe's obviously become England's greatest Test batsman, and now he's one-day batsman. There's a guy that years ago there was a guy that was playing first-class cricket in England for Durham, and he came out and he didn't believe in himself. And he was quite a good player, but he just didn't believe in himself, and he wanted to be the person that did believe in himself, but he couldn't be that person he wanted to be. The thing is, in this program, we run a leadership program because I'm also big about developing the person. It's not just developing the technical skills and the cricket side, but it's also about developing the person, because the person is ultimately makes all the choices and decisions around their cricket game, and ultimately will decide how far you go in the game. Because as a person, you decide how hard I'm going to work, how I respond to challenges, all comes back to the person.
Mm-hmm.
So we run this leadership program. It's about developing people within the program. Anyway, this particular guy, and he was getting really frustrated and he would always talk about the things that were going wrong and not the things that were going right. Even though he was doing okay, he would always see the negative side of things. Anyway, this particular, and it would have been, I think it was in January, we had this review. So leading to the leadership course, people came in and we paired the players up where they gave each other feedback based on the things that each player had identified in what they wanted to become better at in terms of them as people. Anyway, the feedback that this player got was not what he was trying to be. He basically, they said, you need to, sort of be more positive and things like that. And he just basically broke down. Mm-hmm. And this guy was just in tears. And I'm sitting there and he's tears streaming out his eyes. I'm sitting there and I think, I don't know what to do. Like, this guy's just crumbled. So anyway, he went outside and we sort of started having a bit of a chat. And I said to him, do you want help? And he said, yes, I do. Mm. And so I got him to the sports psychologist at South Australian Cricket, and he started doing some sessions. And I said, look, I'm not going to say anything to anyone. It's just between you and the sports psychologist. And anyway, he started working with it. And by the end of the summer in Australia, I said, how are you going? He said, I'm starting to feel a lot better. And he started getting some strategies in place to actually deal with his mindset that was holding him back. And he went back to England, and in that summer he made 100 for his county. And the thing that still amazes me, he's still playing first-class cricket in England, and I'm talking this nearly 10 years ago. I don't think if he was basically broken. I don't think if he hadn't gone through that where he sought help and reached rock bottom, I don't think he'd be playing cricket now. And it's an incredible story, and it's something that I still think of and can still picture. As much as I've worked with and been lucky enough to sort of work with and help, guys playing international cricket, just that story about someone who's overcome incredible challenges and where he had to get to actually then rebuild himself. He was broken. And, as I said, now he's still playing first-class cricket and he's still doing well. So he's now a consistent player in the county team. There's another guy called Lewis Hatchett who had a thing called Poland syndrome. So that's a thing where half your rib cage is missing. He got told when he was a young child he would never play sport. He came out to us as an 18-year-old and he bowled these little gentle outswingers. And basically the first weekend of the season, he broke down because his body was very weak, because he had this physical disability and his body was really weak, and he broke down and he was crushed because he'd only been out a week, and all of a sudden he couldn't do anything. I had a conversation with him and I said to him, what do you want to do? Do you want to go home or do you want to stay? He was thinking about going home, but I convinced him to stay in Adelaide and start to rebuild himself. So he started going to the gym and he got some help in what he needed to work on from a physical point of view. and he became this sort of almost gym junkie, and he started to build a body that was incredible, even though he had this massive disability where he was told he would never ever even play sport at any level.
Wow.
So he went back, and after Christmas he was ready to go again. His body had healed, and he was in a position where he could start playing again. And I said to him, right, what do you want to do? He said, I don't want to play. And I said, you've got to play, because he was fearful that he would break down again and go back to square one again. I said, you've got to take that chance to move forward. So again, he started to play, and he got through the season. He went back to England, and he started to bowl quicker and quicker. And he went back to England, and he started playing some second 11 cricket for Sussex. The following year, he made his first class debut for Sussex, and he took 5 wickets on debut.
Wow.
And he became this machine. He would run to the gym and he'd go and do his gym session and then run back from training. So he would run, like it was about a 2-mile run, to and from training. No one does that. They get in their car and drive. He ran. He became really disciplined in how he looked after his body, and it almost became his temple. But he needed to do that. But he became, so disciplined. But, the thing was, and he bowled about 135k. So he went from this guy that bowled these little gentle outswingers when he came out to actually bowling decent pace.
Pretty fast.
So again, he was a person that was told he would never play sport at any level, to a guy that played professional cricket for 7 years. Eventually his body got too much and he couldn't continue, but he played 7 years. If anyone, and that in my mind always said, don't ever let anyone tell you can't do something, because I have seen in living proof someone that got told they would never play sport to actually someone who actually played professional sport. Anything is possible if you're willing to put in the work.
Right.
So yeah, there's just a couple of sort of stories, and those things taught me things like, I'm not saying I'm an expert, anything like that, but when you go through things and you see things and you're part of people's journey, they teach you things about what is possible as a coach. And, that's sort of why I enjoy doing it, because I get to see those things and have those experiences.
Even as a coach, it's a constant process of learning, and the feedback that you're getting, both, some of the challenges in terms of developing players, but also the success stories.
That's right.
I feel like it makes you a better and better coach over time.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, no coach knows everything. We all have strengths and weaknesses, but I suppose it's like anything. It's trying to work on things as a coach where you're not as good at, and it's trying to, and it's a long journey. And I've been lucky enough to do it for a long time, and how I coach now is different to what I coached when I first started, and because you learn things along the way, and some things work and some things don't. Like, I remember one of the things when I first started coaching is sometimes you were fearful of doing things because it might not work. But now I have the approach, I'm not fearful of trying to do things. If it doesn't work, you can tweak it, you can adjust it. But I don't not do things because it might not work.
Right.
You still put thought into it and all that sort of thing. I'm not saying you just do things willy-nilly, but you try things. And if it's not perfect, right, how do I tweak that? How do I make that better? It might be a little adjustment you need to make, and then it's a really good session you do with your players.
So a good seg into the high performance program. Obviously, a lot of thought must have gone into creating it and running it so successfully over such a long period of time.
Yeah.
You must have felt like there was a need to do something different and something more I want to say rigorous or purposeful within coaching. So tell me a little bit about the high performance program and what success has that led to?
Yeah, look, again, I've been lucky enough to, and again, you learn from other coaches you work with, and I've been lucky enough to work with some really good coaches in the high performance program. And they've certainly helped me develop and evolve as a coach, and you learn from them. But I think one of the things that really helped me as a coach, and I remember like when I sort of started my coaching and I did some coaching qualification stuff with Cricket Australia, and they would talk about what's your coaching philosophy. And I was sort of thinking like, what are they really talking about? And I'd sort of say things that I thought everyone wanted to hear. I didn't really believe in it, but I sort of said, it's work hard and, get a good technique. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I didn't really believe in what I was saying. But one of the things then I started to really think about, it was I came up with these 3 things that are pivotal in terms of even today, underpins everything I do as a coach. So one of them is making players uncomfortable, because there's no improvement in comfort. Making players uncomfortable is where there's mistakes made, but there's where you get the opportunity to learn. If players aren't making mistakes, they're just doing what they can already do. You've got to push players out of their comfort zone. So that's number 1. Number 2, cricket is a game that's continually throwing questions at you. So I talk about finding a way. The best cricketers find a way. So things are happening. How do I navigate my way through the situation to find a solution to the problem? So you've got to be able to think your way through. And the third thing I talk about is developing the person, because again, my experience is the best cricketers are generally positive people. They're self-directed. They've got a good work ethic. They do the extra training. They're good reflectors and on what they're doing, and they work out what they're doing well and where they need to get better. And again, it sort of made sense. But when Joe Root was out, and he sort of confirmed a lot of these things in my head, because what happened was he did all those things. He loved making himself uncomfortable. He was very good at problem solving. So the sessions we're doing here in Dallas, similar to what we're doing with Joe Root, but he loved it. Some players don't love it because what happens is they get exposed. So there's consequences to getting out in some sessions. But a lot of cricketers love to hide in training sessions. They don't like consequences. But you need to get feedback in your training and things like that. So anyway, Joe was very good at problem solving, and he was, he'd have a smile on his face, and he'd always train it at game intensity. And then the third thing he was really good at, he would always be out, when you talk to him after a session about what had just happened, he was always really good at reviewing it. He'd talk about what he did well. This is 19 years old, what he did well, what he needed to do better, how he was going to do that better. He would always do the extra training sessions. He wouldn't just say it, he'd always do it. And so when he went back to England and his career started to take off, what I saw in him in Adelaide, I could see these things actually work, because his cricket career just went boom. And within 2 years, he was playing for England.
Yeah.
So what he did for me, he gave me a lot of belief in those things that I sort of thought, yeah, I sort of believe, but he confirmed a lot of those things in my mind. And look, different coaches have different philosophies. I'm not saying what I have is necessarily works for other, but for me, and what that does, it gives me consistency. It gives me structure in terms of, so when I'm looking at what I'm doing in the session, does it have an element of uncomfortability? Does it have an element of problem solving? And is it going to make the player is it going to challenge them as a person, and it's going to make them uncomfortable? Is it going to challenge them as a person? So if they, not working hard, or they're not bringing the right intensity to training, and they're not problem solving or working out things, they're going to get found out. So if it goes tick, 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 right, we're doing it. If it's not, if there's not an element of any of those things, right, I need to adjust what I'm doing. And so it doesn't matter whether I'm running a training session, a training cycle, a training program, a training like a whole complete program, those things have to be in there. Even going on a tour. And I've been on international tours with groups to India and Sri Lanka and that, the tour has to have those 3 things in there. It has to be developing the person, them growing and maturing as a person. It has to have a level of difficulty. I want them to play teams where I would prefer to see them lose. This kind of sounds weird, but I'd prefer them to play teams where they lose than them play teams where they win by 100 runs.
Right.
Because if you win by 100 runs, you're not learning
You're
anything.
not learning much.
Because they're developing. It's not like you're playing for a championship or anything like that. You're developing the cricketer and you're making them uncomfortable. I like to play a lot of cricket in a short space of time because playing one day and having 3 days off, you're resting. But when you're going cricket, playing, you get tired, you get sore, and things start to get hard. You actually start to see what makes that athlete tick. When people are comfortable, you don't really see the real them.
Right.
And so one of the things, we talk about is pressure and uncomfortability reveal character. You don't see it in comfort.
Right.
So then you can have conversations to the player about where they need to get better. But you don't find that. You'll have different conversations where players everything's beautiful and wonderful and easy and nice. Those things don't come to the surface, but those things will hold you back if you don't have those things exposed. And the players are probably not going to address those things unless they get exposed, because that's human nature.
Do you think communication with the players beforehand plays an important role, because the players need to understand what to expect and why they are going through what they are going through? They'll be more receptive to.
I do, because again, you have to get their buy-in, because if they're going to make themselves up, they need to know why.
Yeah.
And so that comes back to that, I suppose, that relationship and trust, where you're saying you're doing these things for these reasons, because these things, I believe, are going to help you become better. So when they go into that space, they know that it's not a bad thing. It is a thing for their development and growth to become what they want to become. So I think it is, because otherwise you're going to get a player saying, well, why am I doing this? Like, I don't want to do that because I don't understand why. And the why is really important. Because the why connects what you're doing with the bigger picture.
You mentioned earlier Joe Root was playing like a second 11.
Yeah.
That almost seems something I can't believe or can't fathom now, the level of success that he's reached. But you probably saw some of these softer elements of him having the potential to develop and putting himself through everything he was ready to do everything to be able to get there.
Yeah. He did all those things. I knew he would, because he did those things, I didn't know that he'd become what he's become, but I knew he would do well, because when you put people in those situations, because you know those things are the ability to work through difficulty and being uncomfortable, you know that those are a requirement at the elite levels, because that's that world. That is a very uncomfortable world at the top. And if a player can't handle that or doesn't know how to deal with that, the system will spit you out.
Yeah.
So, as I said, I knew he would do well, but I didn't know he'd do as well as he had. But there's things that you saw. And I'll give you another example of Joe Root. So when he came to Australia on his first tour to Australia, and back then England would start their tour out in Perth, playing Western Australia. And one of the guys that actually used to work in the program with me, and he's actually coming to America as an umpire, his name is Paul Wilson. Blocker Wilson, played Test cricket and one-day cricket for Australia. He was in the program, but he was umpiring in this game in Perth. So anyway, England had it was the first touring game of the tour. Anyway, they'd spent the whole day in the field, and I rang Paul Wilson that night and said, did you catch up with Joe? And he said, yes, I did, because he was umpiring in the game. He had a bit of a chat with him. But he said there was a guy at the end of the day's play who was out on the ground doing sprint work with the S&C coach. And he said, guess who it was? So he'd been in the field all day, and then he was out with the S&C coach doing sprints. And he said, Blocker said to me, he said, so who do you think was out there doing the sprints? And I said, Joe. He said, yes, it was. Everyone else was in the dressing rooms. End of the day's play, Joe Root's out on the ground doing wind sprints He's doing the extra work. That's what makes him different. He does the extra work. And those things are the things that sort of separate people. Another classic example of that is there's a guy called Scott Borthwick he was a leg spinner and a batter, played a little bit for England.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember this, like when he was out the same year as Joe, and Scott was a pretty good athlete, and he was doing really well out in Adelaide. Anyway, this particular day we did the yo-yo test. We're doing the yo-yo test in the indoor centre at Adelaide Oval. And my office at the time was sort of in the indoor centre and overlooked the batting, the lanes in the indoor centre. Anyway, Scott's come up the stairs into my office and he's put the head on the desk and he said, I feel terrible. I've got the flu, and he's got no energy and stuff like that. And I said to him, look, go home to bed. You work hard, miss the yo-yo test. It doesn't matter. And he sort of sat there for a minute and he thought about it and he said, no, I'll do it. So, okay. So he went downstairs and did the yo-yo test. He had no energy. He was flat. He had the flu. Felt like rubbish. He went down and did it. Not only did he do it, he won it.
Wow.
So he beat everyone. He got to a level of about 23. So he's got the flu. He feels like rubbish. I gave him an option out. He declined. And he went down and did it, and he won it. And I said there and then, I bet you he plays for England. And he did.
23?
Based on purely what I saw then in that, because he's tough. And he's not looking for excuses. 99% of the cricketers would go home. Scott Borthwick and not only did he do it, but he won it. Incredible. And that's why they're good. And it's not the coach saying that. That's them. That's coming from within them. There's something that drives them. That they're not looking for an out. They want to do the work. They see adversity and they want to push through it. And so when things get tough, they've trained the mind to push through. They're ready for it when it gets hard because they push through challenging situations and their choices.
It almost seems like the biggest role or job of the coach is to get the best out of almost every player.
Yeah.
Not every player will play at the highest stage, and that's fine. But if you do that well, then you'll have some remarkable success stories, as you mentioned.
Well, I think it is. I mean, because you're right. Everyone is different, and it's not about turning everyone into a superstar because that's unrealistic. And all you can do is try and help someone become the best they can become. And if you can do that, and you can help someone to do that, and understand, I'm not here saying just because these players have come out to me that I've turned them into this. It's not. They have a lot of people that guide them and direct them, and you're just one little cog in the wheel. But what I'll say is you're just trying to help them get to the next level quicker than perhaps what they would if they never had that opportunity that they're involved in your sort of program sort of thing. And it goes back to that moving through the system as quickly as you can, because I think the quicker you can move through the system, what you can then turn yourself into is far greater.
It's faster.
The longer that gets delayed, that window of what you can turn yourself, it starts to get smaller. So it's all about, you trying to get them to the next level as quickly as you can. And as I said, they've got great coaches back where they're from and all that. But it's just trying to accelerate that development and trying to push them through a bit quicker than what they would have if they hadn't been in your program.
So it seems like one of the key takeaways for players, for parents, who have youth players, play tougher and tougher cricket, play higher level cricket.
Yep.
That means that you are more likely to develop faster and better as a player.
Yeah. I think, and again, I'll go back to the skill acquisition expert. I think it is a combination of the both, because also you need to have success. So if I'm always just going through struggle and I'm not doing very well, I don't really learn how to actually dominate, and I don't really have anything that's going to build my confidence. So you need to also play at your level where you're doing really, really well. So I'm learning how to make big, hundreds or big scores. I'm learning how to dominate the game, because that's also a learning skill that you need to develop as well. And learning how to do that as you go up you actually, you've done it at a young age, and you know actually how to do that as your skills improve and you grow and get stronger and things like that. So I think it's a combination of both. If you only get one, I think you miss out on the benefits of the other.
Right.
Because again, if you're just getting exposed and doing really well at your age group level, sometimes you can get ahead of yourself and you actually think, well, I'm doing really well and this is really easy and I don't need to work hard, and you actually think you're better than you are, and that creates the wrong mentality, and you start to develop the wrong mindset, which can actually then impact what happens down the track.
Make it more difficult to develop.
Yeah, so you need to keep your feet on the ground. Like, cricket's hard work. There's challenges and things like that. But as soon as you think in the game of cricket that you've got the game scun, and you think this is easy, you're gone. You're finished.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'll go back to a Joe Root, and I think the incredible thing about him is not so much about what he's achieved from a statistical point of view. The thing that I admire about Joe is his ability to keep striving, keep challenging, keep evolving as a cricketer. And to do that for, I think, nearly 15 years is a hell of an achievement, because that's not an easy thing to do. Because as soon as you get complacent, the opposition work you out and you actually start going backwards. So he has the ability to keep developing and keep improving and looking for things where he's better, whether it's mental, technical, tactical, whatever part of it is. And at that level, it's not 90%. It is 100%. You've got to be invested and doing these things, because as soon as you drop back 5% at that level, you'll gone.
Get found out. Right.
Yeah, your game just doesn't stand up. So the one thing he hasn't done in his cricket career that I know that he wants to do, he's never made 100 in Australia. He's never made 100 in Australia. It's the only thing he hasn't achieved. And he knows it, and he's got an Ashes series this next summer in Australia. It'll probably be his last Ashes series. And
I bet he gets there.
He always has, as Joe's always had a sense of occasion. Whenever he's gone up, it's like he's just he's going to do well, because he's always had that ability. And my gut instinct is he's going to do it, and if he does it, look out, because it'll be the biggest celebration you've ever seen, because as I said, it's the only thing that he hasn't ticked off with his cricket career.
Right. So he's really looking.
Yeah, he's got close a couple of times, but he's never made 100.
Wow.
So even when he was out playing in Adelaide during the program at his club, I think 70 something was his highest score, but he never got 100. So at any level of cricket in Australia, he's never got 100.
So I know the opposition would be Australia, but if I may say, I'll be rooting for him to get that 100.
I do, because as I said, he just deserves to do it, because again, he's England's greatest Test batsman, and he may go on and become the highest ever. He might beat Tendulkar. I mean, he's a couple of thousand to go. It's whether he's got another couple of years in him. If he can sort of hang in there and have another couple of years there's every chance you'll go past Tendulkar and become the greatest ever.
Which would be a huge thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So.
Well, we can't let you go until we talk about US cricket.
Yes.
It seems like there's a Cambrian explosion happening in this country, especially after the pandemic. The number of players that have caught on to cricket, things have just exploded. It's a very exciting time to be here, and I know you've done a lot of work. Maybe talk about your impressions, and maybe talk about like what we can do. To get US to
play with the
a
big
couple
boys.
Notches to be able to get into the play with the test playing nations.
Yeah, so look, I've been coming out here for about 10 years. And interestingly enough, my first coaching camp I did 10 years ago was actually in Dallas. So that was my first experience into US cricket. So I've always seen here that there's potential here. Like and a lot of the time it's just, you probably wonder why you're doing it, because it's not easy over here. There's always challenges. It's not like in Australia. There's not the structure, and facilities aren't like they are in Australia. So it's difficult to do things. But I've always seen there's potential here in the US. So I've always, every year I come out here and run camps and whatever. But one of the things out here, there is talent. And there's talent here that's probably, when you look at it, you go to a training session and you look and you think, gee, he's all right. But the thing that probably is missing is this game aspect. Yeah. Now, last year we had 6 US lads come out and train in South Australia in our high performance program. And again, these were some talented lads. The 3 of them were in the US under 19 trials. So they look good, but the thing that you notice when you start seeing them playing against Australian players, even at club level, is that the way they go about things is not to the level that you need to be successful in Australia. So to their credit, they've come out and they've tried to learn and things like that, because again, I get back to you only know what you know. If that's your environment, that's how things are done.
Right.
You don't know what those things are that you need to get better at until you experience things. So what we've actually done now is we've actually created this sort of pathway. So as I said, the high performance program in Adelaide that runs for 6 months, where players come out and they train Monday to Friday and they play for clubs on the weekend. So they get a mixture of training. Training 5 days a week for 20 weeks is hard. You physically get sore. The routine, you've got to get structures and you've got to get discipline, because it's one thing doing it for a week or 2 weeks, but to do it for 20 weeks is tough. So there's a lot of development and that sort of thing with the players out there. So the other thing that we've actually partnered with Adelaide University. So one of the things in the Indian community that's really important is education.
Mm-hmm.
So now there is the potential for Indian players to come out and do their university studies or their college studies in Adelaide, and Adelaide University is a top 100 university.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to make a choice between cricket and study. They can actually still do both.
Pursue that.
But they can also get in the cricket system like I was talking about before, where they could be playing against 7 first-class cricketers. And so they're actually getting exposed to very, very good level cricket that you don't get in the USA, and learning that game. If they're good enough to dominate that competition, they could actually go on and let's say in the T20 competition, they could actually get a Big Bash contract. They could get a professional contract because they're playing against players in the Big Bash. They're going to get recognised, and coaches are going to start saying, who's this guy? And so, like I said, they could actually get so they could, become a professional cricketer. So we actually now have a pathway to actually, we're doing camps here where we're, doing a bit of what we do in Australia, and we're doing that over a week. That then they might say, well, I want to actually come out to Australia and do some training in the high performance program, and then come out and study and actually spend 4 years out there really developing. And if you've got talent, there is no reason why they can't be like any other Australian.
Right.
Because they're getting exactly the same environment.
They will get developed.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I think is important that I don't think people really think about is the cricketers around you are the role models on what you learn. So if you're playing lower level cricket and the senior players aren't really professional in how they do things, you then actually learn what they're doing. But if you're out in Australia and you're playing in around professional cricketers, how you go about things is completely different. And so your role models in what they're teaching you and shaping you in how you think, how you train, how you prepare, how you learn, the things you need to do to be successful are completely different. And you're in that environment where you've now got the opportunity to actually work on those things. And if you've got talent and you get better at those things, there's nothing to say that you're not going to actually be as good as anyone in Australia.
And
so it's very unique.
Yeah.
There's no other country in the world where those first-class professional cricketers go back and play club cricket. In England, it doesn't happen because the professional cricketers are playing county cricket all the time. They don't go back to club. And in India, it doesn't happen unless
Right.
you're obviously an Indian. But if you don't have an Indian passport, you can't play.
You
They
can't
don't allow
play.
you to play at those high levels. So Australia's the only country you can do it.
Even in England, there is like a path to residency is what you have to show to be able to play
Yeah,
county
yeah, that's
cricket.
right.
Whereas in Australia, it's different. So
Yeah.
that's something for the audiences
Yeah, that's to think
Uh,
about.
to keep in mind and think about.
And I know there's I've spoken to people here about that, this pathway, and I know there's a lot of interest with it.
Yeah.
So, for Adelaide University to come on board, and it also means we're training using their facilities, and they've got very good facilities. So, there's nothing there to sort of stop you from being the best you can be, really. Because it's even things like there's a difference in Australia how you train. Like I noticed when Americans come out, and it kind of sounds a bit weird, but they don't, the way they go about training is not like an Australian. I'm not saying everyone in Australia is perfect because they're not. But if you're going to play a high level, you have to adhere to the way things are done because if you don't, the system spits you out. So, you've got how you go about things. And it's just what I noticed with, you turn up on time. You don't turn up 1 minute late because that's a mindset.
Yeah.
And, if you're playing professional cricket and you turn up late to training, they tell you to go home and you might even lose your contract. So it's just things like that because the discipline, the structures and the routines and the habits you build are all things that actually help you be the best you can be. If they're poor, those habits and routines and structures around you, you're compromised. You're not going to get the best out of yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to be very inconsistent and you're not going to be able to be the best you can be, certainly under pressure. So you got to learn those things. And as I said, in Australia, you have the role models, the better players. So you look up to those. What are they doing differently? Right, I need to do those things. And you learn those things. Those people shape you. And it's not just sport. It's in every aspect of life.
And even if that doesn't work out for some of the players or many of the players, they'll still benefit by having that exposure and being part of that environment to come back.
Absolutely.
And apply those things
Absolutely.
here, and they'll be so much far,
they're
so much ahead of.
Yeah. So they're going to actually come back and start to have an impact on cricket here because they're going to show there's a different way of doing things.
Right.
And they're going to be the senior players and they're going to be the people that influence. And so the young cricketers are going to start to actually look up to them about how you go about things. And so then they start doing things. And all of a sudden, the culture and the way things are done starts to change. So, yeah, I think it can have a real positive impact.
Well, I really hope a lot more of the aspiring, American players take advantage of it.
Yeah, so we've got quite a few signed up for this year, so
That's awesome.
There's more coming.
We got to talk a little local. So talking about Dallas. So you've been here a couple of days, but what are your early impressions? We're training at the Dallas Sports Center.
Yeah, the Dallas Sports Center. Yeah.
With Coach Sandesh Duri, who's done an amazing job with the facilities.
Yes.
So your impressions of...
Yeah. So look, again, to have it's a bit unique in terms of what they have at the Dallas Sports Center. The fact that they actually have the oval, the indoor facility, and the outdoor training nets all within the same facility is very unique. So, and again, tends to what happen is that you have to drive from this place to that place, and so it becomes a bit messy. But to have all those things, and they've also got accommodation and things like that. So there's actually thinking, and I spoke to a guy yesterday about the running some sort of ongoing program using the accommodation, a bit like what we do in Australia, but because it's got the accommodation facilities, you can actually have players sort of residential, and so training every day and all that sort of thing. So that's, to me, very unique, and it creates an environment that you can actually develop players, and it takes a lot of pressure off parents having to, drive players to and from and all that sort of thing. And even if you come from interstate or from another state, you can actually go there and actually, sort of have your accommodation provided and not having to sort of book into hotels and motels and things like that. So it makes all that a lot easier to actually facilitate a program like that. So yeah, there's a good facility there, and I'm sure they're going to continually look to improve it and develop it, and over the years, and it'll become, I think, quite a hub for development of cricketers in the USA, I think. And Sandesh, he's passionate. He's doing it for the right reasons. And you need that. You don't want people going through the motions. You want people invested emotionally in it because they want to see cricketers get better and they want to see cricket improve and develop and that sort of thing. And when you've got people like that, they tend to go above and beyond and make the experience better. When you've got people that aren't necessarily invested emotionally and going through the motions, they tend to just do the bare minimum.
Right.
So, that's my experience.
I saw you like early in the day today when we met at the Dallas Sports Center. What I found unique and interesting is you were talking to one of the players, one of the most upcoming players at in Dallas, Ajay Prithviraj.
Yeah.
You had a lengthy chat with him.
Yeah.
So it's not just about okay, let's do work on this drill or that drill.
No.
I think working on the mind, especially early on, is so important.
Like you got to try and find out what's going on in their head, because you can't solve anything if you don't know what's going on. So again, you've got to have those conversations. And I suppose, again, the Australian approach to coaching, generally speaking, is trying to, as much as you can, to get the answers out of the player. So it's not telling the player what they need to do. It's trying to get the player to actually come up with the answers. So how you question the player and how you structure the conversation, you're trying to dig around and get them to solve the problem. And the reason for that is this. When you solve the problem, you understand why you need to do something. And the other thing is, when you solve a problem, it sticks in your mind. You remember it. When you get told things, and this is just the way the human brain works, most of what you get told goes in one ear and out the other. So while you might be saying all the right things and telling the right things, a lot of that is going in one ear and out the other. But when you get the player to problem solve, they will remember it forever, and they can see how what they're doing is connecting to the game and how they're going to play better, because they've dug deeper in terms of actually that understanding. So that's the theory and that's the science behind it. So it's trying to drag the answers out of the player as much as you can.
Well, I feel like we can go on for another hour or two, but maybe let's end with the rapid fire. This is June of 2025, and your predictions for the World Test Championship, Australia versus South Africa.
Well, I'm a bit biased, I suppose, but again, I think Australia's been there, done that, and I think
it's a finals.
Yeah, it's a final. So I'm back in Australia.
Your predictions for the India-England series in England, a brand. I think it's a very young Indian side, very unusual from many years.
Yeah, it's a hard one. England at home are always harder. I think on paper, if you looked at the two sides, you'd say India have got a better side. England are a little bit inconsistent. I think a bit depends on how the series starts. Like if India starts strong, I wouldn't be surprised if they win the series. If India start poorly and England get their tail up, my feeling is England will win. So a lot will come down to the first couple of tests. But I think it'll be a really good test series. And I don't know, maybe England by a nostril, but as I said, if India start well, I can see them winning winning it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting. You took so long to kind of
yeah,
get your
I'm on the fence.
lean one way or the other.
Yeah.
As an Indian supporter, I'll take that as a
yes.
positive sign.
Yeah. like again, as I said, I mean, I think pound for pound, India are probably better. Again, Bumrah's a huge factor.
Yeah.
He was the big, like in the Test series just gone in Australia.
That
he was
huge,
massive.
Yeah.
Without Bumrah, they would have got beaten quite easily, I think.
Yeah.
But and in English conditions, he could be a huge factor. And he needs to stay fit.
Wish he could play 5 tests, but
yeah.
And then last one, Ashes.
I think it'll be a good series. I think England. There's a little bit of uncertainty around Australia. Like the top order, there's a little bit of uncertainty. There's a few questions. England are a bit more settled. The Australian bowling attack is an old bowling attack. It's whether all that they can stay fit. England, I think a lot of the Australian players, their best cricket is behind them. A lot of the England cricketers, their best cricket is in front of them.
Mm.
Again, what I'll say is, I mean, I think Australia will win, but I think if England can start well, there's every chance that they could create an upset. And I think Joe's a key for their batting.
Right.
If he has a big series, he's going to be really important. If he's just sort of middle of the road, I think their batting might be a little bit shaky as well. So Australia I think it'll be a good series, but Australia by a fraction, I reckon.
Awesome. I'm really I'm sure you are too. I'm looking forward to all these tournaments. But Shaun, this has been amazing. This has been a great podcast for me personally. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the audience has also learned a lot, and I wish you all the very best in all your coaching endeavors, and hope more and more players take advantage of what you have to offer.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the opportunity, and like I suppose if I'm talking to the US cricket, I mean what we've now sort of creating in terms of a pathway. I hope that it really starts to have an impact on cricket here in the USA, and I think it can really develop, and become a really sort of US can become a really sort of strong cricketing nation, and get up there and start competing in some of these big tournaments consistently. And I hope that happens.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.